before the flood, before the ark, before the world was washed clean in the waters of judgment, there is a strange and haunting passage in the book of Genesis, a passage only a few verses long. But those few verses have inspired thousands of years of debate, speculation, fear, and fascination. It speaks of mysterious beings called the Nephilim, giants, warriors, men of renown, and perhaps something even stranger. Were they ancient tyrants whose violence helped corrupt the world before the flood? Were they merely powerful kings and warriors remembered in mythic language? Or were they, as later Jewish tradition suggested, the unnatural offspring of heavenly beings and human women? The Bible gives us only fragments, but those fragments are enough to open one of the greatest mysteries in ancient religious history. The mystery begins in Genesis chapter 6. The world is growing more populated, humanity is spreading across the earth, but something is going terribly wrong. The text says that the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves. Then comes the line that has echoed through history. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward. The passage goes on to describe them as mighty men, men of old, men of renown, and almost immediately after this, the biblical narrative turns dark. God sees that the wickedness of mankind is great upon the earth. Every intention of the human heart is described as continually evil. Violence fills the world. The flood is coming. In the story, the appearance of the Nephilim is not presented as a harmless curiosity. Their presence comes right before the moral collapse of the pre-flood world. That is part of what makes the passage so fascinating. Genesis does not pause to explain exactly who they were. It does not give us a genealogy. It does not describe their height in detail. It does not tell us everything we want to know. Instead, it gives us a glimpse, a flash of lightning in the ancient storm, and then the flood arrives. The word Nephilim is difficult to translate. Some connect it to a Hebrew root meaning to fall, which has led many to call them fallen ones. That interpretation fits well with later traditions that connect them to fallen angels. Others suggest the word may refer to those who cause others to fall, violent warriors, conquerors, or terrifying figures who bring destruction. In ancient translations of the Hebrew Bible, the Nephilim were often rendered as giants. That is why so many later readers imagined them as towering beings of enormous strength. But the meaning is not perfectly clear, and that uncertainty is part of the mystery. The Nephilim are not introduced like ordinary people. They feel ancient even within the ancient world. Genesis refers to them almost as if the audience already knew the stories. They were the mighty men of old. In other words, you have heard of these figures before. They were legendary. They belonged to the age before the flood, an age of violence, unnatural power, and corrupted glory. Genesis says the sons of God took wives from the daughters of men. That phrase, sons of God, has been interpreted in several major ways. The first and most dramatic interpretation is that the sons of God were heavenly beings, angels or divine beings who crossed a forbidden boundary by taking human women. This view became very important in ancient Jewish writings outside the Bible, especially in the Book of Enoch. In that tradition, the story becomes much more detailed. A group of heavenly watchers descends to earth, takes human wives, teaches forbidden knowledge, and fathers giant offspring who ravage the world. This version is mythic, cinematic, and terrifying. The second interpretation is that the sons of God were not angels but powerful human rulers, ancient kings or nobles who claimed divine status. Under this view, Genesis is describing tyrants who took whatever women they wanted, building violent dynasties of warrior kings. This interpretation makes the story less supernatural, but no less dark. It becomes a story about power, exploitation, and human arrogance. The third interpretation is often called the Sethite view. In this reading, the sons of God are the descendants of Seth, the righteous line of Adam, while the daughters of men are from the line of Cain. The passage would then describe the corruption of the righteous line through intermarriage with the wicked. Each interpretation has its defenders, and each changes the story. If the sons of God are angels, the Nephilim are hybrid beings, part human, part heavenly, and deeply unnatural. If the sons of God are kings, the Nephilim are violent warrior aristocrats, men turned into legends because of their power. If the sons of God are Sethites, the Nephilim become part of a broader story about humanity's moral decline. But no matter which interpretation you choose, the result is the same. Genesis is telling us that the world before the flood was not merely sinful, it was disordered. The boundaries of creation were being violated, power was being abused, violence was spreading, and the Nephilim stood at the center of that ancient darkness. To understand why the Nephilim became so famous, we have to look beyond Genesis. One of the most influential ancient texts on this subject is the Book of Enoch. The Book of Enoch is not part of the biblical canon for most Jewish and Christian traditions, though it was highly influential in some ancient communities and remains part of the canon of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. In Enoch, the story becomes much more elaborate. The sons of God are identified as the Watchers, heavenly beings assigned to observe humanity. But instead of remaining faithful, they descend to earth and rebel. They take human wives, they produce giants, and they teach humanity forbidden arts, weapons, sorcery, cosmetics, astrology, and forms of knowledge that lead to corruption and bloodshed. In this version, the Nephilim are monstrous giants who consume the earth's resources. When humanity can no longer sustain them, they turn violent. They devour, destroy, and fill the world with blood. The flood, then, is not only a judgment on human sin, it is also a cleansing of a world infected by rebellion from above and violence below. This Enochic version had a major impact on later imagination. It gave names and motives to the mysterious figures in Genesis. It transformed a brief biblical reference into a grand cosmic rebellion. Heavenly beings fall. Giants walk the earth, forbidden knowledge spreads, the world descends into chaos, and judgment comes from the sky. Even today, when people imagine the Nephilim, they are often imagining them through the lens of Enoch, even if they have never read it. But the mystery does not end with Noah. Genesis says the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward. That phrase has caused centuries of debate. Afterward? After what? After the sons of God took the daughters of men? Or after the flood? The Bible later mentions giant clans in the land of Canaan. In Numbers chapter 13, Israelite spies return from the promised land terrified. They claim to have seen descendants of Anak there, who come from the Nephilim. They say, "We seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers." This is one of the most dramatic moments in the wilderness story. The Israelites have been delivered from Egypt. They have seen the Red Sea part. They have followed the pillar of cloud and fire. They have received the law at Sinai. And yet, when they see the inhabitants of the land, fear overtakes them. The mention of the Nephilim makes the promised land feel not merely difficult to conquer, but mythic and terrifying. Were these truly descendants of the pre-flood giants? Was this an exaggeration by frightened spies? Or was the memory of the Nephilim being used to describe unusually tall and powerful warrior peoples? The text itself leaves room for debate. Later, the Bible mentions groups such as the Anakim, Rephaim, and Emim, peoples remembered as giants or mighty ancient inhabitants of the land. And of course, the most famous giant in the Bible is Goliath. Goliath is not directly called a Nephilim, but he belongs to the same world of giant warrior imagery. He is enormous, armored, terrifying, and seemingly unbeatable. When David faces him, the story becomes more than a duel. It becomes the victory of faith over monstrous power. The shepherd boy defeats the giant. The weak overcome the strong. The God of Israel triumphs over the terrifying warrior of the enemy. Whether or not Goliath is connected to the Nephilim, he shows how powerful the image of the giant became in biblical storytelling. The giant represents violence, arrogance, and impossible odds. and the defeat of the giant becomes a sign that no earthly power is beyond the reach of God. Stories of giants are not unique to the Bible. Across the ancient world, cultures told stories of mighty beings who lived before ordinary history. The Greeks had titans and heroes of semi-divine birth. Mesopotamian literature included kings who were larger than life, such as Gilgamesh, a mighty hero said to be partly divine. Norse mythology told of the Jotnar, often translated as giants. Many cultures remembered an earlier age when beings greater than modern humans walked the earth. This raises an important question. Are these stories simply myths, or are they mythologized memories? In ancient cultures, the line between history, theology, and mythic storytelling was often not drawn the way modern people draw it. A king could be remembered as larger than life because his power shaped nations. A warrior could become a giant in the imagination of later generations. A destroyed civilization could become a legend of a fallen age. The Nephilim may belong to this kind of ancient memory. They may represent a world where violence was heroic, kings claimed divine privilege, and power became monstrous. Or, from a more supernatural reading, they may represent something even stranger, a moment when spiritual rebellion entered the human world in bodily form. Either way, the mythological aspect matters. Myth does not always mean false. In ancient storytelling, myth often means a story that explains the deep structure of reality, why the world is broken, why evil spreads, why pride leads to destruction, and why humanity needs judgment and redemption. The Nephilim story is mythic because it speaks in symbols of enormous power, heaven and earth, human beauty and forbidden desire, giants and violence, fame and corruption, the old world and the flood. It is a story about what happens when greatness is severed from goodness. One of the most popular questions is also the simplest. Were the Nephilim physically gigantic? The answer depends on how you read the texts. The ancient Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible used a word associated with giants. Later, biblical passages describe giant clans and unusually large warriors. The fear of the Israelite spies in Numbers makes the inhabitants of Canaan sound terrifyingly large. But Genesis itself does not give measurements for the Nephilim. It calls them mighty men, men of renown. That could mean enormous physical size, but it could also mean tremendous power, reputation, violence, or heroic status. In the ancient world, giants could be literal, symbolic, or both. A giant is someone who towers over ordinary men, physically, politically, militarily, or spiritually. So the Nephilim may have been imagined as literal giants. They may have been remembered as legendary warrior kings, or they may be a fusion of both, ancient tyrants whose size and strength became magnified in the memory of later generations. But the biblical point is not merely that they were tall, the point is that they were mighty, and their might was connected to a world descending into violence. That is what makes them dangerous. The Book of Enoch adds another layer that has fascinated readers for centuries: forbidden knowledge. In Enoch, the Watchers do not only father giants, they teach humanity things humanity was not meant to know, or not meant to use in that way. Weapons of war, enchantments, signs of the heavens, adornments tied to seduction and vanity. Knowledge itself becomes dangerous when separated from wisdom. This theme is ancient, but it feels surprisingly modern. Humanity gains power before it gains virtue. We learn how to build, conquer, manipulate, and destroy faster than we learn how to be righteous. That is part of why the Nephilim story continues to resonate. It is not only about giants in the distant past, it is about the temptation to become giants ourselves, to seek fame without holiness, power without restraint, knowledge without humility. In Genesis, the pre-flood world is not destroyed because people are weak, it is destroyed because people are corrupt. The mighty men of renown are not saviors, they are signs of a world gone wrong. Their greatness does not prevent judgment, it invites it. Today, the Nephilim have become a major subject of speculation. Some connect them to ancient megalithic structures, Others link them to lost civilizations, alien theories, or global flood legends. They appear in fantasy novels, video games, conspiracy theories, and internet documentaries. Why? Because the Nephilim sit at the perfect crossroads of mystery. They are biblical but barely explained. They are ancient but still debated. They are connected to giants, angels, demons, forbidden knowledge, and the flood. They feel like a missing chapter of human history. But this is where we have to be careful. There is a difference between exploring mystery and pretending speculation is fact. The biblical text gives us enough to ask profound questions, but not enough to answer every modern theory. Many claims about the Nephilim go far beyond the evidence. That does not mean the mystery is meaningless. It means we should approach it with both imagination and discipline. The Nephilim are most powerful when we let them remain what they are in the text: shadowy, ancient, terrifying, and unresolved. They are not a puzzle we can fully solve. They are a warning. So what are the Nephilim? Giants, fallen ones, warrior kings, the offspring of angels, symbols of ancient tyranny. The honest answer is that the mystery remains. Genesis gives us a brief window into a dark age before the flood. Later traditions, especially the Book of Enoch, expand that window into an entire mythic universe of watchers, giants, and forbidden knowledge. But the central message is clear. The Nephilim represent a world where boundaries have been broken. The heavenly and earthly orders are confused. Power has become predatory. Fame has replaced righteousness. Violence fills the earth. And mankind's heroes are not holy men, but mighty men, men of renown. Men remembered not because they were good, but because they were powerful. That may be the most frightening part of the story. The Nephilim are not just monsters from the ancient past. They are a mirror. Every age has its mighty men of renown. Every age is tempted to worship strength, beauty, fame, conquest, and forbidden power. Every age tells itself that greatness is the same as goodness. Genesis says otherwise. The world before the flood was full of giants, and it was also full of corruption. In the end, the giants could not save it. The Nephilim remain one of the Bible's most mysterious figures. They appear suddenly, like shadows before the storm. They stand at the edge of the flood narrative, surrounded by questions that have never fully disappeared. Were they giants born from a forbidden union between heaven and earth? Were they ancient kings whose violence became legendary? Were they mythic symbols of a world intoxicated by power? Perhaps the answer lies somewhere between history, theology, and myth. But one thing is certain. The story of the Nephilim is not just about what may have walked the earth before the flood. It is about what happens when creation rebels against its creator, when power becomes unrestrained, when fame becomes an idol, when mankind reaches upward, not in worship, but in pride. And in that sense, the mystery of the Nephilim is not only ancient, it is timeless. Because the question is not simply whether giants once walked the earth. The question is whether we still bow before them, and whether, in our own age of power, pride, and forbidden knowledge, we have learned anything from the world that came before the flood, or whether we are still building the same old world, one giant at a time. If you enjoyed this documentary, subscribe for more videos on ancient mysteries, biblical history, lost civilizations, and the legends that shape the world.